This is Tom Shepstone from Natural Gas Now.
Excellent. Looks like the mic levels look good. Just turn it down a tish. There we go. It should be okay. We don't even need to redo them. That's how confident I am with this. All right. See, that's what a pro does.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Anyway, appreciate you joining me. Say, I was on your website the other day, and I noticed that, excuse me here while I do this, renewable energy industry seeks to scam public during health crisis. And that's a topic that is really one that if they're not talking about it in the halls of Congress, they need to really fast because it's one that's out there, it's real, and it's almost like if anybody brings up anything that goes against the grain, you immediately get publicly shamed by people. So I'm really glad that you kind of have taken this on, at least with Natural Gas Now.
Great.
Talk to me a little bit about the story. Who's behind it, and was it you? Was it someone else? Just let's talk about it.
Well, first of all, I published this post, which is from the American Energy Alliance, and I have a relationship with them. It's not a monetary relationship, but where they will allow me to use their post. They're part of the Institute of Energy Research, which actually has three different blogs that I take material from time to time. And they're good people and some very knowledgeable people that are close to the ground politically as to what's happening in the energy field. And I saw this, and I really couldn't believe it. Though I published this on March 19th, which was what, Friday, last Thursday. So I know this stuff goes on, but when you see it in writing, that in fact the House Democrats are trying to use this coronavirus crisis, and we can debate how whether it's a crisis or not, or whether the measures are right or wrong, or all those things. There's plenty of opportunity to do all that, but that they're trying to push stuff into this bill at this critical time that has zero, absolutely zero, to do with the supposed crisis or real crisis, depending on your viewpoint. So the credits that they're asking for relate to solar and wind energy, which have been on a ride for a long time. And what's been happening is over time, these things were supposed to have been temporary when they were first done, 20 years ago and so on. And over time, people have been grown very disenchanted with them, although they still enjoy a certain level of political correctness. And a number of states have tried to limit these kinds of things. The federal government has tried to ratchet it down. They never seem to simply say, "Time's up. Enough is enough." That never happens. It's always a very slow ratchet down. But that has been happening. So what's going on now is the Democrats are essentially saying, "This is our opportunity to reward one of our key constituency groups. We will get something big and more permanent on these wind and solar energy tax credits." And of course, it's a ripoff of unimaginable proportions. It is. I'm going to say it. This is evil. This is truly evil. That these people are trying to do this at this point. I don't think I'm exaggerating. So I'm very upset about it.
I just want to make sure I'm following this here. Are we talking about these like tax credits and tax credit extensions that I've been reading about and hearing about, and even had a few people interviewed on this platform about like solar and wind? There's like a lot of them due this year, right? Am I following this right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
like they're ready to sunset, right? They're ready to expire or whatever the case might be. And so there's a lot of talk that um, if these what do you want to call them, extension, I guess, if these subsidies do not get extended, it's going to make that industry extremely vulnerable. And now, am I following this right?
Absolutely. I mean,
Okay.
the whole industry, the renewable energy industry, with a few exceptions. I mean, there's a few things that make sense. Geothermal energy has a place for sure. Solar rooftop has a place where it's supplemental. Wind has a place where it's filling in a gap. That kind of a thing. But on the whole, all these things are gigantic ripoffs. I mean, they do not work unless they get hidden subsidies in the form of tax credits and similar types of things. The other one is these requirements that you that you use a certain amount of renewable energy in a an energy portfolio if you're a utility. So there's so many ways, and it's all invisible to the consumer, the energy consumer, mostly invisible to the energy consumer. It's in very fine print on the bottom of your utility bill that says you're being charged, and it uses some kind of euphemistic term that you really don't even know what you're being charged for. So they've been getting away for this for years. Congress has been, and the states have been trying to ratchet it down, but the Democrats are now trying to ratchet it up in a big way in the middle of a crisis. I mean, they're holding the country hostage, essentially.
Are they trying to insert these tax extensions, these subsidy extensions, into this, like these $1 trillion packages that I'm seeing floating around that they're trying to pass emergency wise?
Yep.
And for real? That's where they're trying to insert these things in.
Absolutely.
Okay. I did read your article right then, because I'll be honest, when I read that, I thought I wasn't reading it right.
Yeah, I know. It's incomprehensible. It's the legal term for what's going on here is unconscionable. It's unconscionable behavior, and that is a legal term. You can look it up.
This kind of mirrors the 2009 stimulus bill a little bit, doesn't it? In terms of just throwing it in there.
There's no question about it. And we know what happened there. We know that. I remember a friend of mine, not a particularly close friend, but a friend, was involved on the board of a bank in New Jersey, and he said to me at the time, we were talking about some railroad stuff that we were mutually interested in, and he said to me, we didn't need that money, but it was so cheap we had to take it. So that's what was going on. I couldn't believe he was telling me. They took the money. What was it called? It started with a T. I forget. But anyway, the TARP money. Remember?
Yeah.
TARP. He said we didn't need that TARP money, but we had to take it. It was just so cheap we couldn't turn it down. So this is how it works.
Let me ask you this. I guess I'm not familiar. I have not been following this. What I've been following a little bit is how they're starting to frame some of. I saw in Venice. You can see fish now, and some dolphins are swimming in the canal, and where they're really starting to frame that people staying at home. So the satellite images say that fracking causes deformed children and things like that. You know what I mean? Where they just exaggerate things. I was starting to see the framework of where they were taking just human activity slowing down and spinning it that this is because of fossil fuels not being used. And I get it to some part. I've been in Southern California and seen smog. I've been around smog, and I understand human activity, and I understand all of that different thing. But at the same time, I do understand when you're not moving boats around in a canal, well, that's going to clear the water up just naturally. I mean, I get some of that stuff too. So some of this is a little Al Gore inconvenient truth. And some of it is legit. Like I say, there is smog in Southern California. That was a problem for a little bit, and the industry kind of corrected it and took care of some things. And are you following that at all? Just a framework of how they're trying to attack the industry with this?
Well, a little bit. I must say that I just simply take that stuff for granted anymore that that's going to happen, and we do have to fight back against it, and we have to correct the record. That's all part of what is necessary. It's part of what I do with my blog. But at the same time, I think it's more important to point out what they're doing, which is ripping off the taxpayers and the ratepayers to do this stuff. I mean, so much of what passes for green, what passes for environmentalism, is purely special interest lobbying for government rent. I mean, government rent is what so many people are after. We need a lot more real capitalism in this country. Real capitalism is cutthroat competition between private entities. It's not ripping off the government for subsidies and rent, as they say, government rent. And that's what a lot of it's been. And I don't think we can ever eliminate it entirely from the system, but we can sure controlled it a heck of a lot better than we have, and we need to expose it. And I think the offense, and in this respect, I'm a little bit like Johnny Green. I'm trying to point out the absurdities of what's going on here, and rather than playing defense all the time.
It's a tough one. It's really difficult because, pointing out the absurdity seems to actually connect a little bit more than giving somebody verified data. I mean, you give somebody verified data, and I joke, it's like you handed them a turd sandwich or something. Like they look like they're disgusted, And
well, there's
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, there's a famous book. It's by a philosopher. It's called The Pensees by Blake, and he wrote in that book. And when I bought a copy, and actually it was never intended as a book. It was actually a series of observations that was put together after his premature death and put into a book because they were so good. But he basically said that nothing is accomplished by trying to argue, facts or logic. It's the imagination, facts versus imagination. If you want to win an argument, you've got to capture the imagination. Imagination is what sells. And I think our side, always, when I say our side, people believe in energy, believe in work, all the traditional values. We tend to always try to respond with facts and logic. And we've got to get better at the imagination side of this stuff if we want to win the arguments. We just we just can't keep trying to play this game of throwing out facts and assuming the other side, which is approaching things from a religious perspective, semi-religious or pseudo-religious, I should say, perspective. Facts don't matter. They just don't. They simply don't matter. And logic doesn't matter. It's the true believers, and that's there's also a book by that name which gets at this issue too.
Well, let me ask you some facts here, as one journalist to another, one storyteller to another, and you can wear either hat if you'd like. You can wear both of them if you'd like, because it's like Terry Edom and I always joke about Terry Edom up in Canada. He's a blogger. He's also a writer, and he's also an author. And we joke that I don't think anybody knows that those are three distinctly different things. But to be an author and a writer are really different, and a blogger is completely different. At any rate, the reality is COVID-19 and the coronavirus is currently here, and it has already disrupted the economy. And if the oil and gas industry was moving along to where it was before, we might have been able to not have these stimulus conversations happening right now. Because let's be honest, the oil and gas industry carried the rest of the country for about 5 to 10 years, really, in the last 15 years. It did. I've seen the stats. Right. And it's the only industry that added jobs in the last 10 years. The technology industry didn't. The healthcare industry didn't, surprisingly, with the increases they've had. So when I look at the oil and gas industry kind of getting beat up a little bit, I'm like you. I'm an old school capitalist to where a guy can come into a community, find a niche, and when the economy's not doing as well, he understands that and gives back to his community in any which way he can, because he understands the symbiotic relationship that the only reason he's got money is because the community gave him that money. And so it kind of goes back and forth. So the fact is, Vegas is going to be shut down for another 30 days. And when you look at just what that's going to do to the economy, and you've got restaurants that are shut down, and I always like to bring up the first line of defense as the ripple, so people understand. A server, they need cash money. They need daily cash money. In many states, they don't even get minimum wage. That's how much reliant they are in cash. So when the server can't pay their rent or mortgage, most times they supplement a mortgage or pay rent. Usually a server can't afford a mortgage by themselves, but maybe they can in some cases. Nevertheless, there is going to be not only the server affected and the restaurant owner affected, but now you got the landlord of the server being affected. And so just right there, you've got, a 3 ripple without even thinking very hardly. Now let's go to the oil and gas industry here, to where, boy, this really impacted the industry in a way that they didn't see coming, in a way that Russia and everything else. What are you hearing from people? What are you seeing in terms of trends and other things happening that maybe the oil industry should pay attention to?
Yeah, well, there's no question that it's being affected dramatically. I mean, if I'm looking at the natural gas price right now on my website, we have a little thing that tells you it's $1.60. That's incredibly low. Everybody was hoping to get it up to $4 by this time. If we look back a couple of years. So what this has done is it's exaggerated the impact of being in a commodity business.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in a commodity business, you constantly have to lower your costs. There are very few, if any, opportunities to increase revenue. You constantly have to lower costs. That's the nature. It doesn't matter. I think we've had this conversation before. It doesn't matter whether you're in the dairy business or you're in the steel business or you're in the oil and gas business. You're selling a commodity, and commodities, there are very few opportunities to set your own prices. You are vulnerable to whatever the market is because it's something that everybody needs, and when there's too much of it, the price goes down, and when there's not enough of it, the price goes up a lot. And right now, we've overproduced. Been doing it for a long time, and as a result, we have a situation where prices are abysmally low, and now here along comes the coronavirus, and reduces, just as one example, reduces all the driving. I mean, I was talking to somebody from Long Island earlier today, and he was going into the city. He was driving, as he was calling to me, to see his very elderly parents, which he's not supposed to do, but he's going to do anyway, because he properly feels that giving them comfort is more important than dealing with their threats that are their health. And he said to me, the city is like a ghost town. He said he says you can drive right through the city with no obstacles whatsoever. So imagine what that means. This is the heartbeat. New York City, like it or not, is the heartbeat of the world in terms of commerce. So and it's dead. It's absolutely dead at the moment.
And that's any town USA right now, to be honest.
Yeah. My wife and I like to eat out on weekends. We usually eat out 2 or 3 nights, and we went to one of our favorite restaurants. Well, our restaurants are closed here, but they all do takeout. So we went to one of our favorite restaurants, got takeout on Saturday night. It was very good, but when I went there, they said they weren't going to do it anymore. They tried for a few days, and only a few people came, so they were going to shut that down as well. Now, fortunately, this particular business has something else they can do, but there you go.
Let me ask you this: you're a smart guy, and you understand capitalism, okay? Uh-huh. And I think you and I have maybe even talked about this before, where the oil industry is really the last bastion for capitalism.
Yeah, that's right.
You look at every other industry; they're so subsidized that it's not a free market. And I do not feel guilty at all by saying that at all, that the oil industry is the last bastion for capitalism. That's really what attracted me to the oil industry.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm totally with you.
Okay, so when I see what's going on here, this really concerns me. This really concerns me because I don't want to put a conspiracy hat on. But at the same time, I don't want to ignore some of these factors. That is, I don't know how you can shut an economy down the way they have, that is so socialized to begin with, to not come back and become even more socialized. And I'm not trying to get into some political yada yada discussion. I'm just trying to figure out that I don't know what they can come back with except something like that.
Well, let me give you a little source of some hope. Let's put it that way.
Please do.
I think the president's doing a good job on this. We can all pick at this or that, but I think he's doing a good job because what he's emphasizing over and over again is the way he's working this through private industry rather than government. Government is obviously playing a huge role, but he's emphasized over and over again that look, for example, for the testing, we're not going to continue to rely on this ridiculous government system that's antiquated and couldn't possibly do it. We're going to go directly to industry. We're going to set up work with private labs and all that kind of stuff. And as a result, I think he's instilling a sense that when you really want to get things done, you do need a capitalist economy. And also, he is cutting all kinds of additional regulation. He was always a big regulation cutter, but now he's an even bigger regulation cutter. And we have even, liberal governors deciding all of a sudden they don't need to regulate this or that. They are, everybody's changing their ways. And we may find, for example, just to get off on a totally unrelated topic, we may find cyber schools and school choice and homeschooling and all those things being a lot more popular all of a sudden, don't you think? Because of what we see with this.
We're definitely going to have a hybrid going forward.
Yep.
In fact, I was talking to a couple business people yesterday, and you might start seeing office shares instead of timeshares. You might start seeing guys and girls, a little old school here. Jeez, boy, that's got to be careful in today's day and age.
Yes.
So, I mean, you could. It's back like when Howard Dean made that funny noise and ruined his political career. You get one, you get 1 second of excitement, and it can be the end of it. But no, I mean, where people understand that most of the work that you do can be done at home, but there is a need for an office. And so, like I was talking to a guy yesterday. Well, maybe 3 different companies go in on an office together, and you know what? Monday this company gets it, Tuesday this company gets it, Thursday. You know what I mean? They kind of just.
There's no question.
Yeah, and to me, I see where that's going to be the future. We're going to start doing some things outside the box. We're going to start approaching things a little bit differently. And that's what I mean when I say when we come back in the next, say 90 days when this is all said and done, because when we're doing this interview right now, I just read 3 more states shut down. Like the governors came out and shut them down. So, we're far from this. I think this will probably go through midsummer, if not more. And,
oh, God, I hope you're wrong. I really hope you're wrong on that.
Well, just Vegas being 30 days right there, you're talking, into May. Yeah. And that's and that's going to take a little bit to bounce back, anyways.
Well, I think this is an area where the president's going to have to give some real leadership and start to make the case logically for why we need to get the economy going again.
Well,
we need to lift some of these.
And that's where I'm a little bit disappointed in the Republicans right now, to be honest, because they were the ones that led with this stimulus package. And
I know.
I agree with you, the way Trump's trying to slash some of the regulation and taxes, because what's going on here is at the end of the day, Tom, there's still the same amount of money on the planet. I mean, it's still circulating around the planet. What we've got to do is we've got to incentivize and get the people to spend it instead of hoarding it, instead of trying to go after them and get their grandkids, kids money. That doesn't make any sense to kick it down when you can open it up. I see that people don't like me talking like this. They don't like me trying to. I would love to see in the next 90 days come back with more of a free market as opposed to less of a free. I am not hearing anybody talk about opening up the free market. All I'm hearing people do is talk about more control, less rights, and all these. And I get it. There's some serious stuff going on. But if we take care of it, why not come back with a fresh new market out there? That's how I look at it. But anyway, so
I could not agree more, and I just hope and pray the president will take that direction and try to lead in that path. This whole thing, with these bills are just it's the only way Washington seems to know how to work. I was pleased that the head, I can't think of his name at the moment, but the guy who leads the American Petroleum Institute did an interview on one of the financial networks the other night, and he made a very strong, impassioned plea that we do rely upon the private market, and as tough as it is for the industry right now, and the industry is going to suffer awfully, they do not believe in handouts. They would prefer we keep a free market approach to this, so that's the best way to deliver what what people need. Let's put it that way. The market is only a reflection of people.
You're referring to. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, well, the market's just the way that people vote. That's all. So
yeah, I was going to say, and you're referring to Mike Summers, right? The API president?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's right, Mike Summers.
By the way, Mike Summers was scheduled to be in this program in May at the Williston Basin Conference. Has now been bumped to September, but he will be a guest on the program. And we did talk about. Great. We talked about him a few weeks ago when he first came out with that. In fact, he came out with that right away, like before anybody even really had a chance to process it. He came out, and I brought this up, and I'd like to know your opinion on this. And I'm sorry to keep you so long, but what the heck,
That's right.
know? This is one of the things where we looked at the oil and gas industry with this big crew shift, that's going on. 70% of the industry is going to be retired by 2022, but now based on, it might be a little bit later now. By the way, think of all those old retirees that had a lot of oil stocks, and then a lot of the other stocks that I diversify. I feel really bad for those guys because it's in the tank. Yeah. And anyway, getting back to the other point at hand here, I did notice when Mike Summers came out with that knee-jerk reaction. I mean, it was so knee-jerk. He responded before a lot of other media outlets even had the story. That's how knee jerk it was. Like, he didn't check with anybody. He's like, no, we know how the industry responds on this.
Oh yes.
Well, and then all of a sudden, the bailout talks started ramping up more and more. Will the oil industry need a bailout? This and that. Well, then all of a sudden, other organizations are saying, didn't you listen to Mike Summers? He said no. We say no too. And I started thinking, going, this is one of those line in the sand moments for the oil and gas industry, because if they take a bailout, the new generation coming in has changed the industry forever. I really believe that.
No question.
Yeah.
No question about it.
Do you understand what I mean? I'm not trying to make this bigger than it is, but I think it is that big.
I do too. I totally agree. And there's so many people in the industry that want to play ball with the establishment, so to speak. And it's always refreshing to see somebody that doesn't. And I was thrilled with what he said, and I hope we continue to see some more things like that, because if they do surrender to this, you're right, it's the end of the game, because at a certain point what will happen is if they take it now, they'll take it away later, after the industry's become dependent upon it. And, of course, we're seeing this with other aspects of the energy industry. The nuclear people have sold out, totally sold out. And I'm not against nuclear energy. I'm all for it, but it's absolutely revolting how they are scrambling for government subsidies at this point. Totally scrambling. I mean, we're living in a corporatist world, and it's very.
What I struggle with is the energy industry really is the last industry for opportunity. And I know I said I said capitalism before, and I mean that, but I also mean opportunity. And what I mean is, you take a look at the technology sector, and even go back to Apple Computer. They actually, I think it was Hewlett Packard passed on it because they were under contract because Steve Wozniak worked part-time for Hewlett Packard. And so the technology industry owns you. And in the agriculture industry, as soon as Monsanto took over that industry, they owned all the patents and everything else. And same thing in the entertainment industry. That's been completely Hollywoodized. The energy industry is the only industry that I know of where a guy who works for an oil company can figure out a new vibrating tube that saves the company money. And next thing you know, a month later, he's a president of his own company, and he's got 3 big clients, and he can. I mean, I don't know any other industry that still allows that.
Those are great examples, and I would just, again, to give you some more hope. I mean, I started buying. I never had a Ford vehicle in my life until Ford refused to take the auto bailout. Okay, now I'm sure they get some help with other ways indirectly, but they refused to take the auto bailout. I made up my mind at that time. As much as I love my neighbor who owns a Dodge dealership, I was not. I was not going to buy another one. I was going to buy a Ford, and I bought 3 of them since. So I believe people do want the independence and the less reliance upon government when they really think about it. And I would point out one other thing, and then I probably need to cut this short. But on my blog today, I have a post. It's not getting as much attention as I hope, but I did a post on oil and gas music. What does this have to do with what we're talking about? It has everything to do, because you just talked about the guy who works for an oil company or a gas company, and he may start out on the ground level, and then he works his way up to be president. And there's a certain culture to this industry, which is reflected in the music, and it's kind of hardcore, independent, scrappy. And you might enjoy it. Take a look at it, and you'll see some examples of Johnny Cash singing "Roughneck" and Waylon Jennings singing background to an outstanding video about the oil industry.
No kidding.
And I think the culture is what attracted you. And you started off our talk today about the culture attracted you, and the culture is what attracts me to this industry. It's like, get your hands dirty. Yeah. Get rid of the pretense, just get something done, And if you got a problem, figure it out. Go around it, so.
That's why we in fact, the original name of the show was Living the Crude Life 10 years ago, because it's a whole different way of life, and we used to joke that until you can make $1 million decision on 2 hours of sleep with a seat belt wedged in your back while getting a nap behind Walmart, you haven't lived the crude life, that type of thing. So, go ahead. I was going to say, how can people support your cause? I know that now's a good time for people to go check out your website. A lot more people working from home. They got furloughs.
Yeah, check out naturalgasnow.org, naturalgasnow.org. And if you like what you see there, sign up as a supporter. It's only 99 cents a month. So there you go.